Welcome to Let's Eat. I'm your host, Emily, holistic health coach and self-proclaimed wellness enthusiast, here to meet you at the intersection of physical and mental health, the exact location where optimal wellness lies. This podcast is meant to explore all areas of mind and body wellness, designed to offer you the integrative knowledge, behavioral strategies, and mindset shifts necessary to uplevel your health and feel better today. We'll explore nutrition, sleep, movement, self-care and stress management, habits and routines, gut health, mental health, and more. I am so happy that you're here. Welcome to the table. Let's eat. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Eat. Today's guest, Ken Kaplan, is the owner and founder of Quantum Wellness. Quantum Wellness is located in Bedminster, New Jersey. For those of you who are local, you'll definitely have to check it out after you take a listen to this episode. And Quantum Wellness is a wellness center. They offer infrared sauna, cryotherapy, float therapy, Reiki, massage, and so forth. And on today's episode, we are exploring these different wellness modalities and the benefits that they bring to the body. So for me personally, I love using their sauna. I did try their cryotherapy once and I plan to do it again. But for those of you who know me, you know that I love going in saunas. It's one of my favorite things. It's actually one of the dates that one of my best friends and I do maybe once a month, once every few months, is go spend time in the sauna together. And I've said this to her before, I go, it takes a special kind of friendship to be able to sit in the sauna with someone. I feel like you can't do that with all friends, you know, like there's like a certain level of comfort to sit in your bra and underwear with one of your best friends and just chit chat while sweating and all that good stuff. But we love doing that. And it was such a pleasure to sit down with Ken to kind of explore how he got started. He is super passionate about float therapy, which you'll learn if you're not familiar what that is. You'll learn about this in this episode. And I tried float therapy once and I have to try it again. I will say he says that a lot of people are skeptical and there's a little bit of hesitation and maybe claustrophobia that comes along with it. I definitely felt that. But he dives into the benefits that it can bring both for the mind and the body. And he also speaks on the value that it's brought his life as a lawyer and his experience getting into float therapy and using it as a form of self-care. And to some extent, noticing the impact that it's had on his nervous system and his reactivity to certain situations. And so he explores the benefits and encourages everyone to give it a go, give it a try. And I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this episode. And also, please let me know if you do decide to try float therapy. I think it's one of the wellness modalities that we don't see as often, at least in my opinion. You see cold plunges, you see infrared saunas, you see acupuncture, but something like float therapy, at least in my experience, isn't something that I see as often. So I'm really grateful to have had this opportunity to explore it as a form of self-care. Ken speaking from personal experience and then what he sees with customers. And I'm really excited for you to listen to this episode. And definitely check them out if you're local. Quantum Wellness in Bedminster, New Jersey. All the information is in the show notes. But please, let's welcome Ken Kaplan to the table and let's eat. Hi, Ken. Thank you so much for being here today. It means a lot to me.
Oh, thanks, Emily. Appreciate this invite.
Yeah, sure. So tell us about your journey to opening Quantum Wellness. Tell us about, your interest in wellness and, give us the scoop.
The journey. So first, by way of disclosure to people, I'm a lawyer. Sorry. Uh, I've been what you'd call a corporate lawyer, or some people would call it a business lawyer for this is year 34.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
About, well, let me say some other things about myself too.
Yeah, please do.
I've always, I seem to have like the kind of person that's always like a seeker. I mean, maybe lot of us are kind of like that, but always looking for answers to things. And what I've come to see is that people who are seekers often have a reason to seek. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I know that sounds almost like, well,
Well, yeah.
thanks, Mr. Attorney. Tell me something that we don't already know. But you have to think about this a little bit differently, I think, to kind of see the point
Mm-hmm.
that I'm making. The point is that, yeah, it's true. People are seekers, but when you have experiences that happen to you, let's call them maybe a colorful childhood. Um, and let's say too that that has an impact on the young mind. And let's also say that the impact on the young mind uh, maybe causes it some amount of stress.
Mm.
Those I found out in particular are the people that tend to go off and seeking. So they do it out of necessity, a
Sure.
lot of people. And I suppose I'm one of those. I come from a family of divorce, and particularly at a really young age. So I never knew how that affected me,
Sure.
but it took a while to kind of see that things got wired in there in ways that I'd say were probably a good reason why. In kind of the middle of that legal career, I started seeking more than I had in the past, especially ways to reduce stress,
Mm.
trying everything.
Yeah.
I mean everything.
Yeah.
Yoga, Reiki, meditation, acupuncture, and even things that I won't share with you and your viewers until all of us are better friends.
Okay. That's fair.
Okay, you kind of get the point.
Yeah.
And in the course of kind of exploring new things, I was at maybe 15 years ago a legal networking event with a bunch of lawyers, what you'd expect at a legal networking event. And one of them said to me, "Hey, have you heard about this thing called float therapy?"
Mm.
And I was like, "What the hell?" I've tried pretty much everything else.
Yeah.
But back in, this is about 2008, 2009, there was really no place in the state of
Totally.
New Jersey to go float.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
wanted to float, you had to go to where you might expect it in Oregon and California and
Sure.
Seattle,
Mm-hmm.
and even one or two places, but that's it in New York. So it wasn't popular, but I did
Sure.
find through my investigations a person in New Jersey that had a float tank
Okay.
in her basement, and she allowed me to float. And so
No way.
I'd go way. I'd go from my law practice pretty much every Wednesday night. I would leave the law practice and head over to her place and float. And it wasn't long. I mean, it wasn't immediate either, but it wasn't long before I had this like, this is the real deal.
Okay.
But I'll tell you that when I first looked at it, I was like, so you got a big bathtub
Yeah.
here, and I'm gonna lay in this bathtub, and this is with 10 inches of water,
Right.
heated to 95 degrees, with 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt, and float like a cork for an hour without any outside world interrupting me or
Right.
begging for my attention. And she kind of
Mm.
nodded yes. And I, with the skeptic kind of that I
Yeah.
am,
Yeah.
I was like, all right, what the hell? What
Yeah.
do I have to
What I have to
lose?
lose.
So
Yeah.
I tried it, and the impact was tremendous. It really was. It's almost like this is not a great way to call it, but meditation on steroids is kind of one
Mm.
way that
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
comes to mind. It's
Sure.
a yeah, it turned out it's a really unique environment, and maybe I can
Yeah.
say more about that after. But to answer your question, once I got that, I was like, well, what the heck? It can't be too difficult to open up one of these in the state of New Jersey.
Sure.
Again, now we're in about 2010. Well, it took me 5 years to actually find a property and open one up. So literally between 2010 and 2015
Okay.
was, you could call, the kind of find the right location search.
Yeah. Yeah.
Opened in 15, moved into a new beautiful space in 2021 where I am now. So the journey is long in
Yeah.
terms of having gotten into this. I think if you remember my story from when we first spoke,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot more to it in
Mm-hmm.
terms of what I was introduced to in terms of how to think about things or how to think about what happens in a float center.
Sure.
And that part is probably kind of the meat and potatoes, or like, really essential to understanding this journey, this thing. But I think I'll stop there because I
Yeah.
feel like I answered the first question.
Yes. Well, I appreciate that. And that's so funny because I know from my experience when I went to float, the thought of you being in some random person's basement doing that, I give you a
Mm,
lot of credit because I
mm,
myself was was a little anxious being, which will eventually get to the point where you can explain more about what it means to float, because I think probably a lot of the audience maybe wouldn't be familiar, but I know for me being in a what I would call a safe space in your facility, right? In your center, I was
mhm.
feeling a little apprehensive about the experience. And so good for you for saying, you know what, I'm going to give this a go. And it sounds to me that it was really beneficial for you. So I guess, along the way, along your journey, which sounds to me took some time, I'd love to hear just a little bit more about how you started to integrate other modalities of wellness into the float. So it sounds to me that you started with float. Is that accurate? And then you expanded to other offerings?
Yeah, the version one of the business
Hmm.
was called Quantum Floats,
Okay.
located in Bedminster,
Okay.
where version two, where I sit now, is located. But version one was in a small rental place, just doing float therapy.
Okay.
Um, but all the while, even day one, when version one opened up in this little place in Bedminster, I already knew that the place I'm sitting right now was going to be the permanent home,
Okay.
and that this is a much more substantial in terms of its footprint and size space. So
Okay.
we added, kind of one easy way to say it is we naturally added other modalities. Float is still at the cornerstone of what we do. And
Yeah.
I remind my staff all the time that I wouldn't do this, nor would I stay in it, nor would I would have done this if not for float therapy. So
Yeah.
I want
Yeah.
people that work here, certainly, and even the people that come through here, to know that that's in the fiber of
Right.
who we are.
Sure.
Mm,
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's great. That sounds it sounds like that is where your heart is, right? And then you've also introduced just some other, which we'll get into more about what other offerings there
mm,
are, to kind of complement that main home
mm.
base. So what do you find are the needs of your most regular customers? What do you find when customers come through the door, even if they're not regular customers, customers of any capacity? What do you find are their primary needs coming to you?
Their primary needs are stress
Yeah.
relief.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, their primary needs are a little bit less anxiety.
Yeah.
Um, that's probably the best way to say it.
Okay.
To say a little bit more about that, though, um, they can't see why they're stressed.
Mm.
They just don't know,
Yeah.
and pretty much none of us do.
Yeah.
That's a somewhat controversial statement because
Sure.
most people will insist that they absolutely do. And if your listenership hasn't already, take offense to what I just said because
Mm.
they know.
Mm-hmm.
For example, they have kids
Mm.
and bosses and coworkers and partners and spouses.
Right.
And excuse me, damn me if I'm going to tell them that they don't know where their stress is.
Right.
You see, but I know that that's impossible. That all those things that I mentioned are the cause of their stress.
Sure.
Can't be. It seems like it is, but at least take this with a grain of salt. But I'm
Mm.
quite quite certain about this. People don't know where their stress is. The reason is
Mm.
because they can't see what they're thinking with.
Mm.
Okay, I didn't say they can't see what they're thinking about.
Sure.
They can't see actually what they're thinking with. If you think about kind of, let's say it this way, You've never seen the color of your eyes. Like
Mm,
literally, Emily, never. But other people have.
sure.
The reason why is because you're looking at the world through them. So
Yeah.
I already know when people come into the center that they complain of stress, but the reasons are sometimes, let's just say, a little bit hidden from
Mm,
what I'll call conscious awareness.
sure.
But this business was built to give people a way to start to, let's just say, get down to the place where it really lives. And it's not with the kids or with
Yeah.
the mother-in-laws or with Uncle Harry or Aunt Betsy. It's not. It seems it is.
Mm.
And believe me, all those people that I mentioned are a handful, but that's not that's not the reason for the stress.
Right. Right. Yeah. Okay. So stress relief in whatever capacity seems to be what draws people to your space. Do you
For
find that this
sure.
is a first resort or do you think it's a last resort? Do you think that people are coming to you saying, I've tried everything, like you had said, right? In your experience where you said, what the heck? I'm just going to try float therapy and see how it goes. What's the harm? Or do you
Yeah.
think that it's, someone's first choice because I think we could both agree that when it comes to stress management, there's a lot of other ways of managing stress that are much less healthful. And oftentimes I think as humans we resort to food, alcohol, you know, doom scrolling, binge watching Netflix, more of these maladaptive coping skills versus the more mindful, the more, meditative work that you and I could probably both agree we all need a little bit more of. So, thoughts on that?
I when you first said it, I was going to say it's a bit of both.
Mm,
It's partly people who have been down the road of pills, maybe
mm,
antidepressants, and maybe other, I'll call them more traditional
sure.
Western medicine things. Um, and then there's also people who just have woven into them that they're always going to take a holistic approach. And for that crowd, maybe they find us earlier than the other
Yeah.
crowd. But I'm not sure. I mean, it's a it's whatever the case, there, people are starting to really pay attention to things maybe on a bigger picture. Maybe you can say widening open the eyes that the things that are out there for us at our fingertips are not for disposal, that have lots of benefits and things, Western medicine and pills, and you could, and all sorts of diets and social media. This is a fantastic tool, but also these things are, um, I say, weighing on us. It's almost like we're
Mm,
at this. I don't want to call it an injunction point, but there is more stimulus and stimulation and things
sure.
right now that are out there for us. And you know, since I was on this planet, I don't ever remember a time when there were so many things that are both very helpful and also potentially very hurtful. And
Sure. Yeah.
those, in that category, I'll put some forms of Western medicine. I'll put our social media access, and
Mm,
I'll even put the foods that we eat.
oh yeah.
And so, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a, a business attorney, and
Yeah, yeah.
I know that people who are running businesses for profit, they want to sell more of their things,
Sure.
whether those things are attention
Mm-hmm.
or processed foods and whatever.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people, I think, that are finding us now and saying, I'm done with that. I'm now
Yeah.
going to start taking control of my own health.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I love to hear that. And I think
Mhm.
too, I'm sure the pandemic, I think that ignited a little bit more of an awareness around the importance of health and maybe illuminated the epidemic that has coexisted or that coexists alongside the pandemic that is, just poor health and poor health practices and so forth. So, I'm sure people who are gravitating towards you, there's probably a little bit of that there as well, knowing that, what you're doing through some of the modalities that you offer is not just for stress management, but it's for full body health. And, obviously we know how influential stress is on our physical health, our mental health, and, that's so important. So let's talk about hot cold therapy or contrast therapy.
Mm,
I myself tried cryotherapy, enjoyed it, would do it again. And I've shared many times, both on my podcasts, on my platforms, with everyone that I know, that the day that I can have an infrared sauna in my household is a very
mm,
happy day. I look forward to that day. And I have been
mm.
hearing it's much more common now. People are installing infrared
It's true.
saunas left and right, and cold plunges and all that good stuff. So tell me a little bit about what it means, hot cold therapy, and kind of your thoughts around sauna, cryotherapy, cold plunge, and so forth.
Okay, I'll start with saying that we have a cryotherapy sauna and an infrared sauna here at Quantum Wellness. Um, when we first got them, we weren't sure about combining those two things together. This is
Mm,
before anybody that ever talked about, at least not that I had heard, this thing that we now hear commonly called contrast therapy, where people are going from hot to cold or from cold to hot.
sure.
Um, so we do have a crowd that does both, but I think it may be helpful to tell you, at least from my perspective, what I think are some of the reasons why people are subjecting themselves to extreme cold and extreme hot, and
Okay.
sometimes even right after each other. Uh, we seem to have two or three kind of groups of people that use the cryotherapy sauna.
Okay.
One maybe you can call kind of the ice bath substitutes. These tend to be people that are engaged in some sort of training or athletic pursuit, and they already know about ice baths, and they've already learned the kind of the benefits of exposing yourself after you train to extreme cold for the purposes of reducing inflammation. And so we have a big crowd that just like they're training hard and they want to reduce inflammation. The reduction of inflammation, it turns out, is a very important thing to always pay attention to our
Sure.
bodies
Sure.
as far as health.
Mm-hmm.
We have another related crowd. They're not really training as much, but they've got chronic pain, which has a relationship to inflammation. So
Sure.
they're doing it as well because they want pain relief. And so
Mm,
they're subjecting themselves to the extreme cold of a cryotherapy sauna for just chronic pain relief.
okay.
The third crowd, maybe you could say, surprised us a little bit. I call them the Wim Hofers,
Okay.
named after I think he's Polish scientist named Wim Hof, who's been really popular and leading one of the leading scientists at the forefront of the benefits of cold exposure. And his research is even beyond kind of the training and the chronic pain. He's talking about results for overall health and
Sure.
longevity and immune system fortification. So
Mm,
we have a combination of all of those three that are using the cryotherapy sauna. The
okay.
infrared sauna seems to fall more into maybe two categories, maybe three. There's been an enormous amount of scientific research in the last few years on cardiovascular health,
Mm,
and lowering what some scientists call all cause mortality. The kind of the short and sweet answer to that is sauna regularly, live longer.
yeah.
There's another crowd that is does it for also for detox,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of sweat out what's ever, heavy metals and mercuries and things that are in their body. Um, and then we've got this new thing that people are talking about called contrast therapy, where people subject themselves to hot then cold or cold then hot, and we do see people doing it in both orders.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like you have a little bit of everyone. I know for me with the
Mm-hmm.
sauna, I did some genetic testing done. I had some genetic testing done back in August, and I learned that I have the MTHFR gene, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but I also have issues with my detox pathways. So that on top of already just enjoying a sauna session was kind of my incentive. I was like, well, I have to do this now because of my detox pathways and I owe it to my body. So it's kind of justified continuing
Hmm.
to sit in the sauna and
Mm,
have my sauna time, which I really, really love. Um,
mm.
can you explain a little bit about infrared and the value of infrared on the body?
Yes. Here, I think we're in an area where the science is lagging the science behind traditional saunas. Um, Infrared is touted as being much gentler and healthier than a traditional, I'll call it electric locker room sauna.
Hmm.
Uh, but honestly, I'm not sure that that claim is fully backed by research yet.
Okay. Okay.
Um, there is some out there, but if you dig in deep to kind of the sauna research, you find a lot of fantastic studies, all super positive, but they haven't differentiated so much yet, as far as I know. It may be out there because I'll say I haven't really checked in about 6 months between the differences between infrared and traditional. With that said, everybody is talking about infrared now. I'll tell you, it's not as hot, so you can last longer. It doesn't feel as
Yeah.
oppressive
Yeah.
um, in terms of what's happening. Actually, it's not heating the air like an electric sauna is. It's actually heating the object. I find it does seem to get in deeper, but
Mm,
maybe more because it doesn't have to be as hot. I can last longer in an infrared sauna than I can in a locker room sauna. And most
sure.
of the private saunas that people have now are infrared saunas. So everything is converting over to that technology. And the other benefit is like, I belong to a gym with a big electric sauna where there's a bunch of sneezy people there, and it's like that's not the experience that we create. The experience we create is you're in the sauna. If there's ever anyone in here with you, it's because you brought them here. So
Because you
there's and it's
chose them.
yeah, and it's well
Yeah.
appointed,
Yeah.
and it's not
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
infrared, but it's Bluetooth with
Yeah.
chromotherapy so that you can
Yeah.
choose a particular frequency in the visible spectrum.
Yeah.
And some people are very particular about wanting red or blue or violet or
Mm-hmm.
green or yellow on a particular session. So
Okay.
they follow that science on the effect of color. So it's got a lot of um, combined benefits to it, the infrared.
Yeah, definitely. That's so funny that you say that. One of my best friends and I, she and I have kind of let go of the days where we go get drinks or we go get dinner, and she and I will just head to Quantum and have ourselves a sauna session together.
Mm.
And that's
So
our, and
cool.
then we get sushi after, and it's the
Of course.
date, the best
Yeah.
date that we could, that we could do
Mm.
nowadays. So that's so funny that you say that you're choosing the person that's going to be joining you. Um, so can you tell me just briefly in the most basic terms, what is cryotherapy for someone who doesn't know what that means?
Yeah, cryotherapy is it's only it's short in duration, so it's going to be 3 minutes. No, you don't have to stay in the cryotherapy sauna for a full 3 minutes. There's always an operator there with you. You change into a bathrobe, and men have to leave their boxers or briefs on. Women don't have to have anything under the bathrobe, but we do make sure that nobody has metal. So if someone's wearing a chain, or we'll have them take that off. You don't want to have metal below the neck. When they go into the chamber, they're not fully encased. In other words, they're not enclosed in anything. It's actually open at the top. So it's everything below the neck. And the reason why that's the case is because the nitrogen gas doesn't head out and evaporate. It kind of is heavier and stays in. So we'll raise or lower the platform to kind of where somebody's chin is. And everything below the chin is going to be subjected to super cold temperatures. By super cold, about minus 200 to about minus 250 degrees Fahrenheit for
Okay.
3 minutes. It
Mm,
doesn't have to, we will vary the temperature based on people's reactions and things. So we'll start them off at a temperature that's not that extreme, and maybe even for a session that's not even that long. but everybody also knows that when they say stop, we stop.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, we do encourage people because it's really cold to kind of push through. It's kind of like an ice bath in the sense that you get in there and you're so cold,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you'd like to
yeah.
get out in the first 3 seconds. But there's benefits to staying, so that's why people do it. And we even have music in there, so if
Yeah.
anybody's so inclined, we'll play some nice music to
Yeah, yeah.
occupy the time while they're dealing with the cold.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I remember telling myself I can do anything for 3 minutes. I could do anything for 3 minutes. And I did it. I got through it. So I definitely want to try it again, that's for
Yeah.
sure. Okay, well, I appreciate that explanation for someone who might not be familiar because I think nowadays we see much more cold plunge. That's like what we talking about hot
Hmm.
cold therapy and conscious therapy and so forth. The ice baths and the cold plunges are much more trendy, I guess, for lack of a better
Mm.
word. But just for the sake of those who might not be familiar with what cryo is, I appreciate that explanation. So
Mm.
let us kind of circle back to float therapy, and I'd love for you to give us kind of a similar explanation of what it is, what it means, what the environment's like, and give us the full experience.
Okay, it's probably helpful to start with a picture that I'll paint. We have 5 private float therapy rooms here at Quantum Wellness. That probably makes us one of the largest, I'll call it, float centers on the East Coast. Each room uh, has its own float tank, obviously. Um, and a float tank, they come in lots of shapes and sizes in the industry. But when you get right down to it, they're kind of all the same in that they're about 8 feet, 8.5 feet long. So there's plenty of room, 4.5, maybe 5 feet wide, and only about 8 inches of water, maybe 10 inches of water. So it's really shallow. That surprises people. And you look at it and say, well, how am I going to float in that? Well, in that water, there's about 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt dissolved. And the entire water then is heated to stay at about 95 degrees. 95, it turns out, is pretty close, maybe a tad warmer, but pretty close than the ambient temperature of your skin. So most people say, well, how come not 98.6 or 7 or whatever your core temperature is? And the reason is because we don't want to set it to your core. We want to set it closer to your skin temperature.
Okay.
So super comfortable. Objectively speaking, a float tank is an incredibly relaxing, comfortable environment. People are totally in control. They'll take a shower before they go in the float tank just to get clean. It's hooked up to filtration, which they can't see behind the wall. So the tanks are kept pristine, clean all the time.
Sure.
Footnote, not to mention the fact that with 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt, no known microorganisms can survive in there.
Okay.
Bottom line is nobody's ever catching anything in a float tank.
Okay, good to know. Good to know.
It's just not happening.
Mm-hmm.
So people go in, they'll take a shower, they'll hop in the float tank, and the first thing I think they're going to be really surprised by is that they've never been this buoyant before in their
Mm,
entire life, not even close. Some people who've been to the Dead Sea or the Great Salt Lake have been buoyant, but this is even more buoyant.
sure.
This is freakishly buoyant. You
Yeah.
float like a cork
Mm-hmm.
effortlessly. So if people like me, I sink. I don't. I must Something must have happened when I was born. I sink in a pool and then I sink right to the bottom
Yeah.
or at the beach. I've never been able to float. So when I
Okay.
first looked at a float tank, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to float this. I know what happens with me in water. I just
Yeah,
go right to the
right.
bottom,
Right, right.
like a cork,
Mm,
effortlessly. Sessions will be from an hour to even longer. And when I say that, a lot of people are like, oh,
mm,
can't sit still. I can't, I can't even sit, I'm having
mm.
trouble in this chair right now for an hour
Sure.
just talking
Yeah.
to you. But I point out to them that they sleep for an hour and they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, I do that. It turns out that the states of awareness that you access when you float are similar, but a little bit different to, we probably should talk in a little bit about what the differences are, but similar to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they were exactly the same as sleep, people would be like, well, thank you very much, but I'm not paying you just to go get a nap. But it turns out it's different. It's vastly different than
Sure.
sleep. And the best way to say that is that it's a very unique environment. Unique in the sense that I'll call it external stimulation. This is the kind of stimulation that we're constantly bombarded with from the outside world.
Sure.
There's no external stimulation in a float tank, which is to say, there's no noise other than noises you make.
Yeah.
The temperature, as I said earlier, matches your skin temperature, so you lose the sense of where your body ends and the water begins. It's dark. I mean, eyes closed, eyes open, pitch black. So there's no light stimulation and there's no sound stimulation. Um, and there's no temperature differential stimulation. And more than those three, the extreme buoyancy of the water cuts off the effects of gravity. So you could think of it in terms of float therapy or time in a float tank frees up an enormous amount of, let's call it circuitry,
Mm.
brain power, because we don't really spend our day thinking about how much of my, I'll call it circuitry or energy, am I spending right now modulating or paying attention to the outside world. It turns out an
Sure.
enormous amount. Here I
Yeah.
am, I'm in your external reality now. Woo-hoo, and you're paying attention to me. And we've got gravity and there's sounds and there's lights and there's all sorts of things. We don't sometimes take into account because, well, why would we?
Sure.
The enormous amount of energy, even when we're in bed at night, that's devoted to the outside world. In a float tank, all gone.
Yeah.
None of that. You get to free up all that extra energy to kind of turn inward.
Sure.
And that turning inward turns out is a profoundly relaxing experience that people notice when they get out of a float tank. They're less stressed. They have less anxiety. They just feel more at peace. The world
Yeah.
feels better. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
colors are more vibrant, we've heard.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I love that. I love that. That's really powerful. So it's essentially, cutting off your senses to some extent because you're essentially saying, you're limited in terms of what you can see, you can't see, you're all of these, common experiences or senses that we have from day to day are no longer there. So it almost forces you to some extent to look inward, to be more introspective. And like you're saying about someone kind of oh no, an hour? That's so long, right? I think that even begs the need. If someone says, I can't sit still for an hour, or I can't sit still for a half hour, I can't sit still for 15 minutes, that is a byproduct of our day to day society now. It's a byproduct of our culture where we're very go, 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 and we're very overstimulated. And so it's almost as though this is something that is further needed for someone to be able to say, all right, I can sit still. I can devote this hour when the other 23 hours of the day, obviously, give or take with sleep and so forth, my attention is always being grabbed and I'm overstimulated and I'm overactivated and whatnot. So I can imagine it could be very therapeutic for someone to really disconnect in that way.
True, yeah. And even sleep is I mean, we're seeing patterns of sleep that I don't even know really what to say about it. Just
Mm,
that to say anecdotally, between when we opened this in 2015 and maybe it's an effect of the pandemic, the complaints of quality of sleep, if
sure.
not even quantity for sure, but quality of sleep, I'm hearing much more. And so the float tank becomes a place to kind of catch up on that.
Mm,
Uh, Probably the most popular book these days, I forget the author's name. It's called Why We Sleep.
yes. Matthew
And
Matthew Walker.
Matthew Walker, and I think Matt Walker is out of maybe Stanford or Berkeley, and it's he's writing about something you think we would know much more about,
Sure.
given that well we spend whatever part of our life sleeping, but it turns
Yeah.
out we're only now in the last decades learning about why we sleep, what happens when we sleep, why we need sleep, and even the different types of sleep in terms of, say, dreamless sleep and what they call REM sleep, rapid eye movement. And even within those, further gradations. We're learning about the importance of that. A lot of the float research seems to kind of match that. It's that you're going into these deeper sleep-like states, but with much more healing power by virtue of the absence of the external stimulation. So
Mm-hmm.
float has a qualitative impact on your sleep that I'm not sure if this is true, but I've heard it is. It's almost more than hour for hour. Some
Mm.
people tout that an hour of float is like 4 hours of sleep. I'm not sure really how they've determined that. And I would take that with a grain of salt, except that it does point to something that's true. It does say,
Sure.
okay, I get that. That's right. If I'm in an environment and I'm accessing sleep like states of awareness with a whole bunch more horsepower or circuitry than I normally have, then it does stand to reason that the healing and transformative effects of sleep, whatever they are, because we're still discovering them, are enhanced.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense for sure. So, with what frequency do you see people coming in to float? And, is it something people do multiple times a week? Do you have your regulars that you see? I know when you and I spoke, you had said that
Mm-hmm.
you float sometimes up to 90 minutes. I don't know if I remember that correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Somebody once asked the Buddha, said, hey, Buddha, how long should I meditate for?
Mm,
It was a guy. He had a job like mine, I'm told, or was a busy person, maybe. And the Buddha said, well, ideally, you should meditate for 20 minutes every day. And the guy said, well, what if I don't have 20 minutes every day? And the Buddha said, then an hour every day.
mm-hmm.
We have people that float several times a week, but we also have people that float once or twice a month and everything in between. I don't think there's a rule. There's certainly not a rule that you can float too much.
Sure.
Although if you're floating every day, what else are you doing? You're probably cutting into other parts of your life. But we do have people that do that. But in my 15 years, I've never floated more regularly than once a week, which seems like a
Okay.
good cadence to me. Um, and I think what happens, I know this is true, when people come into float, they palpably, tangibly notice that they feel better. And then they go out into the outside world and then they work themselves back up again because when they got home, Uncle Harry, he's still there. He was supposed
Yeah.
to leave last night and he's still there and he's still complaining about the way you park your car or clean your house. And so you get all worked up again because he's staying another week and then you come
Right.
back and float and you kind of reset yourself. So,
Sure.
that's how people kind of, people use it because they experience very dramatically the benefits and then they go out and get all kind of worked up again and then they come back and float. I will
Yeah.
say, as my footnote number two, that as the lawyer in me has checked all of the books, all of the codes, all of the applicable federal and state laws, and I find no law, no code, no rule that says we must be stressed. I cannot. It is
You
completely
still haven't found it,
legal
huh?
to
Okay.
be stressed. Completely legal. Everybody is welcome to wind themselves back up. And I say it this way, tongue in cheek, because you don't have to. It kind of gets back to what we said at the beginning about people don't even know the reasons why they're stressed. I'll tell a story sometimes to people when they're like, "Oh no, no, you don't know my boss." They say, "You don't shut up, Kaplan. You don't know my boss." I'll say, "All right, okay." I say it's true. I don't know your boss. I say, but let's say that you and I have the same job, and let's call it we work in a place that has cubicles, and our cubicles are right next to each other, and we're let's call it we're project managers, and
Mm,
so we both are managing the same projects because these particular projects require two people, and we have the same boss, which is to say we report to the same person, sit side by side, as about as close as you can get to have the same experience every single day, especially since our cubicles are right next to each other and we're doing the same thing and responding to the same work environment. I might come home at the end of the day saying, oh, I'm so grateful. I mean, my boss, he's kind and or she's kind and she's gentle and treats me fairly. And my coworker in the cubicle might next door might say, pardon my French, motherfuckers, this is the worst job ever.
Yeah,
Okay.
fair. Mm-hmm.
And I say that to point out that it's not really the outside, it's how we're
Mm,
wired to perceive the
perceive it.
outside.
Yep, it's our
And it turns
perception.
out that float's a great way to start to rewire that so that you don't have to be as reactive,
Oh,
let's
that's
just say, with
yeah.
things. You don't have to take the bait or let your buttons be pushed.
Yeah.
That's one of the first things that I kind of noticed. And I noticed it, as I said, I'm a business attorney. I had been floating maybe for a month, and I was at a board of directors meeting of a company, and the people were hands were smashing on the table saying, you can't do that. You're going to bankrupt
Mm,
this company. And I know the old me would have gotten right up in that energy and been like, no, we can do that. But what I had noticed, I'd only been floating a month, was that, wow, I'm in the meeting, I'm participating in it, but I'm not getting caught up in that frenetic energy.
yeah.
And the ability to participate in life, whether your relationships with your coworkers, your friends, your kids, your lovers, everything is enhanced greatly if you bring a level of calm to it, because you're going
Yeah.
to see more and participate more in what's going on instead of like fuming with anger or resentment or feel like you're being judged or whatever your kind of condition du jour is.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I love that you said reactive was the first, was exactly what came to mind as soon as you said it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our response to so much, and it's about perception and the stress that we are self-inducing as a result of our reactions to things is causing us to be sick. And so if we can find a way to manage or reduce that baseline or regulate, right, which I'm a big believer in supporting our nervous system and taking a breath before before we respond to certain things, or if there's certain modalities like you're saying, right, with float therapy that can help you in that space, your health as a result, not only in the immediate term but for the long term, significantly improves, because inevitably speaking, stress will come our way in life, and it's our response to it that makes a world of a difference. So it's building our resilience to stress, which I talk about all the time. It's about self-care. It's about a number of different things. So I appreciate that perspective. And that's pretty fascinating that it only took you a month to really kind of notice that shift in
Mm-hmm.
yourself, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks. Yeah.
So, what would you suggest to someone who's coming to you for maybe the first time? I do have a lot of local listeners. So, Ken is located in Bedminster. For those of you who are in the New Jersey area, even if you're in Pennsylvania, it's not too far. What would you suggest to someone coming to you, coming to Quantum Wellness to kind of dive in?
Okay. If you permit me, I will speak to 18% of your listener base right now.
Okay.
The others should go get a cup of coffee and come right back, because I need to have this chat with you 18% out there. Okay. Look, I know. Yes, everybody left. Good. Okay. I know that you are claustrophobic. I know
Mm,
that. I know that you are, as if it's woven in your body. I get that. I understand it. I appreciate that. But I will tell you that the experience you have in the float tank, this is probably true of every experience you have, is not going to be the same as the load, the preconceived
mm,
notions that you have going in.
sure.
And I'll also tell you something true, that you're in control of getting in and out of the tank anytime you want. You don't even have to leave the door closed. I advise people it's a good idea to leave it closed, if not mostly closed, but you don't have to. So here you are in an environment that is objectively 1000% safe, maybe one of the safest, comfortable places you've been. And only to the extent that it's perceived as non safe is because that's a perception. But
Sure.
that's what I'm talking about at the beginning, that what we want to do when we are engaging in these kinds of practices is relieve some stress. And you could say that stress relief is about taking things we perceive to be threatening and getting rid of them.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
not because not because we're going to face threats and willy nilly throw ourselves out in dangerous places. What I'm saying is there are places where there are threats. If we're out running in the Serengeti and a lion's chasing us, there's a threat. Let's get our asses out of there.
Sure.
But for the most part, the stresses we put on ourselves are because we perceive a threat in our environment. And claustrophobia is just one of those things. So I do invite that crowd to come. We'll give you a nice orientation. We'll show you how easy it is and how much you're in control of getting in and out of the tank. Okay,
Yeah.
everybody else come back.
You're speaking to me on that because I was that
Mm-hmm,
person and you did explain all of that to me before I
mm-hmm,
tried it. I did have to keep full disclosure, I did have to keep the door open and it was just a it was the first time I tried it. I haven't tried it again since, so I'm well overdue to come back and give it a go again. But yeah, I think that experience is just unlike any other for
mm-hmm,
most, if not all. So I think
mm-hmm.
that's also the adjustment that people have a hard time with, which I'm sure you see all the time with people coming in and trying it for the first time or apprehensive about it and giving it a chance is really what you're asking of them, it
Mm.
sounds.
Yes. And for those that insist they don't want to float, they'll get a massage here or
Yeah.
do Reiki or acupuncture or get a facial or a variety of other services that we
Yeah.
offer. So yeah, we encourage people to float, but we know that there's something for everybody.
Yes, I love that so much. So, Ken, as we come towards the end of our conversation, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience? Is there anything you want to promote for the business? Anything else you can encourage for them?
Yeah, I'll tell people come into the float tank and say, what should I do? What should I be thinking about? Which I don't
Mm,
get involved in that. Well, one, because probably not going to matter much what I say.
yeah,
We had somebody come in not too long ago, and she, as I was doing the orientation, pulled a piece of paper, folded 8 times out of her purse, and as she's unfolding it, she's listening kind of a little bit with to my orientation, but also folding this paper, which I'm starting to find very curious as to why she's even unfolding a paper. And so I took the bait and I said, "What's that paper in there?" And she goes, "This is my to-do list." It's like, okay, well, explain that. What
yeah,
to-do list what? Because this is what I'm going to get done in the tank. And so I let it, fine, yeah, I knew that was not going to really be what she did in the tank. And then when she came out, she's like, "That was amazing," and she's all
yeah.
big smiles and stuff. But I did ask her the question. I said,
Did you get it done?
"How far down your to-do list did you get down?" And she
Yeah,
got a little embarrassed, right? She goes, "Not at all."
yeah,
Um, look, it's almost like this is what I'm going to accomplish when I go to bed at night. There is a certain amount of control that you have, but let's call that for a later discussion. But for the most part,
mm,
when people say, what am I supposed to do in the tank? The only thing I say, and this is kind of my advice when you're in the tank or not, be easier on yourselves, please.
yeah,
Really,
yeah,
it's okay. Just, yeah, be easy. Just surrender to the things you can't control. And
sure,
for the most part, that's probably a good number of the things that you complain about.
yeah,
Um, just let it go.
yeah,
Really, be easy. It's going to be
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And that in that phrase is really kind of wrapped up kind of the whole purpose of why we're here.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think, what came to mind when you were mentioning that is the just general discomfort that people have. And I see this a lot as a coach and as a former therapist with just being and just sitting in silence. And so for someone to ask you, well, what should I think about? Right. I'm not surprised by that by any means, because I think we are always thinking, and if we're alone with our thoughts, that's really scary for a lot of people. And I think being in the float gives that opportunity to them and allows someone to really be with their thoughts, and that can be really awareness, you know um really awareness building, can be really um eye-opening for some, right? You really can get to know yourself on a level that you didn't know that you could get to know yourself on. Things can come up for you that you didn't realize were there, right? There's a number of different
Mhm.
benefits outside of just obviously the ones that you mentioned. But I think it really boils down to the fact that sitting in silence and being in silence is just a foreign concept to so many of us now. And, it's why people have trouble sleeping because of the rumination. And I could go on and on and on, but I won't. So I think there's also that piece to it that, like you had mentioned, someone asking you, what are
Mhm.
we supposed to think about? Like you said, just go in there and let go. Just whatever happens,
Yeah.
happens is essentially what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And we had somebody come in last week and he got a massage and he loved it. And I showed him the float tank and he's like, I said, I'm not going to do it now, maybe some other time. I'm like, well, what's up? He said, um, I feel like my life is just in balance right now where if I step too far this way or that way, the whole thing is going to collapse. To me, it's the most hilarious thing that I've ever heard.
Right.
It's like, and then now, yeah,
Right. And talk about anxious, right?
that's
Like,
not a
oh, like it's
reason.
just that
Yeah,
I just have to keep it this way. And if I do anything too much on one side, it's not going to work out.
for sure.
Yeah.
Here's the math for those out there that like math. I don't know who they are, but say that most, I've heard 90%, but you can insert 80%, but doesn't matter. It's a greatly substantial part of what we do is driven by thoughts below the level of our awareness.
Sure.
That's the first premise. The second one, right under that in the math equation, is therefore, most of what you do, you're not aware of. And under that, just to make it a little more, that means most of the silly shit you do, you're not aware of.
Right.
So that's cool. It's still there. And I'm really agnostic and really sensitive to this. You can keep it there. You're welcome. Again, I checked the law books. It's perfectly legal to, but I always encourage people, wouldn't it be nice? Just kind of maybe a little nice if you started to see the places where you are your own worst enemy.
Sure.
And for that, come on and float if that
Yeah.
resonates with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that so much. Well, thank you so much for this conversation today, Ken. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing a little bit about what you offer. I think float therapy isn't something, at least in my personal experience, that I've seen as much as I do some of these other modalities that you offer, which are wonderful in and of themselves. But I'm glad that you could give us a little bit of a greater explanation and the benefits and the value that it can bring. And so I really appreciate you taking the time today to have this conversation. It's been great.
Yeah, you're welcome very much. I appreciate you too and what you do and all you do for the community. Emily,
Thank
thank you.
you. Thank you. So, for everyone listening, I will put all the information in the show notes, all about quantum wellness, where it's located, its Instagram, so you can take a look, their website as well. So, if you have any interest in visiting, by all means, Ken will be there to welcome you warmly and probably tell you that you need to get into the float tank. So, just forwarding you now. But thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you all. And until next time, be well.